Oh my goodness, I totally forgot something really important. Yesterday we were talking about the nuts and bolts of Esther and where it fits in the Bible, and that was really fun. I enjoyed talking about it. But we got to the end and I was talking about the themes. And I was like, oh yeah, well, one of the themes of this whole thing is the sovereignty of God, the providence of God, even when you don't see him doing stuff. But then I was like, well, that's the theme of the core material of the book of Esther, the expression of the book of Esther that the Jewish people read and continue to read. But I had to acknowledge, in fairness, that there are additions to the book of Esther and that those appear in some Bibles presented in different ways, depending on which Bible you're looking at. And those later additions to Esther, they kind of change the point of emphasis of the book. And yeah, there's still good stuff in there. But Christians do not universally agree that those additions are inspired by God and are a part of the final form. And so as I was trying to explain that, and I wouldn't say tiptoe, but trying to just be cool and respectful and express my appreciation for everybody who's trying to understand and worship and follow the same God, I totally forgot to touch on the second gigantic theme of Esther that we got to talk about in order to really understand this book. And this is going to seem like a weird way of getting there, but just bear with me here. Think about the great big giant holidays in your culture, in your country, wherever you live. My bet would be that the big ones, like the ones that you decorate your lawn for and take a day off and have a big fancy meal over, I bet they're all commemorative of something. Maybe a big moment that happened in the history of your country, maybe something cultural or religious, or you celebrate a hero. Maybe somebody who led a movement or was emblematic of a very important value or shift in your society, or maybe something that celebrates that which is just hardwired into human existence in terms of the roles that we play, Mother's Day or Father's Day. And while I have respect for Secretary's Day or Plumber's Day, I mean, I love what plumbers contribute to society as well. I mean, those are cool, and that's you want to honor everybody's contribution and all of that. That's great, but those don't rise to the upper echelon of the big holidays, because those big holidays are commemorative, but also they're all attached to a given value that we're supposed to remember when we celebrate that day. Thanksgiving, you got to remember to be thankful. At Christmas time, you got to think about peace, and also you got to reflect on the incarnation of Jesus. Easter time, you got to think about new life and the hope and even the forgiveness that is all wrapped up in all of that. Maybe on your country's Independence Day, you reflect on the sacrifices that were made in order to have the good things that continue to exist in your country to whatever degree you have those things. Mother's Day, Father's Day, like I was talking about, it's a moment to stop and reflect on and be appreciative for the people who came before you and the irreplaceable, unimitatable role they played in your life. Well, this way of conceiving of holidays is not new. It's very ancient, and the Jewish people had a robust slate of holidays, with perhaps the most famous of those being the Passover celebration, which commemorates the time that Abraham's great-grandson ended up in Egypt, and then his extended family moved to Egypt, and eventually they became slaves. And finally, God decided it was time to end that state of slavery, and through miraculous signs, plagues even, he finally broke the will of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh relented and was like, okay, fine, you can go. And of course, the final plague that broke the will of Pharaoh back there in the first part of the book of Exodus was the one where the firstborns of every household died unless you took the blood of a lamb. It sounded weird to them back then. It sounds weird to us now, I know, but you took that blood of the lamb and you put it on your doorpost, and that was the signal that judgment was to pass over that house. And this commemoration, this holiday, was so important that right in the middle of this gripping narrative in the book of Exodus, we step aside for a minute for Moses, the author of Exodus, to be like, and here's how this festival works that is going to commemorate this thing that you're just reading about right now that happened here in Egypt. And like, wow, okay, that was a big deal. Well, clearly Moses wanted there to be societal memory of that event to reflect on how God took a people of slavery and made them into a free people, a people set apart for him. And Passover commemorates that and has many other connotations as well. And then shortly after that, there are other festivals that are introduced a little bit later on in the book of Exodus. And you got a pretty full slate of annual holidays And all that stuff in Exodus is happening in 1200, maybe 1400 BC. And by the time you're done with that, you've got a really robust slate of annual holidays and festivals that the Jewish people had been celebrating for centuries and centuries moving forward. And then we get to the story of Esther. And now we're all the way back to talking about another theme of Esther that we didn't get to yesterday. Well, in the book of Esther, a new holiday is initiated. It's called Purim. And much like Passover came to exist as a commemoration of the time that God's people found themselves over a barrel, but God overtly and loudly and bigly and miraculously delivered them, so the festival of Purim is meant to commemorate the time that God's people again found themselves in a hostile foreign land, over a barrel and in trouble, and God delivered them once again, but this time he did it in ways that were invisible and subtle, and that did not overtly and obviously break the laws of time and space to the naked eye. So there's beautiful symmetry between these two holidays and what they remind the Jewish people of. One happens on the very front end of the formation of God's chosen people in the Old Testament. The other happens on the very back end of the historical portion of the Old Testament. And if you've read the book of Esther before, it can be really easy to rightly fixate on the characters and the drama and all of that kind of stuff, and to kind of forget the business about this new holiday that was created. But when you go back and you read through it with fresh eyes, you're like, dang, now this holiday was a really important element of why this book was written. Whoever wrote this thing down, whenever they wrote it, they were trying to explain why this holiday that had clearly already existed for a long time when this book was written, they're trying to explain why it was there and what it looks like to orient yourself and think about that holiday the right way and celebrate it the right way and remember where it came from and commemorate the work of God, and to have this holiday do what it was supposed to do in the hearts and the minds of the people who celebrate it. So as we're on the front end of this journey through the book of Esther, it's very important to note that one of the key purposes of this book, the key themes of this book, is the initiation of a new festival, a new holiday, a new commemoration of another great thing that God did to deliver his people. Now we're ready next time around to land the plane on orienting where this story fits biblically, and then to pivot on to talking about where this story fits in terms of extra biblical history. And I think all of that is going to be a blast. And I expect that, like what we've done so far, is probably going to continue to be pretty fun. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.